job through this. Easy for listening and was able to do it. Easy for dancing. I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Have Your Say, one-on-one shadow boxing. Today, my guest in the studio is Brian Tennant. Brian, I heard about you before, and everyone said you've been in a mistake. Tell me the story.
Yes. Okay, just very brief. My mother wasn't married, and in the 1930s, if you weren't married, and there was certainly, and if you were poor, there was no single parent benefits. There was nothing like that at all. You relied on soup kitchens, the salvos, and those sorts of people. And my mother she was one of 4 sisters, and their mother was more like a, you know, she was a mother, but she was an alcoholic. Yep. And all the sisters, all their daughters ended up in an orphanage down Adelaide Terrace. But however, my mother was different than the other 3 sisters. She had a touch of Aboriginality, a few features, a little bit of colour. In those days, early last century, that was not a very good thing. But however, when she was socialising, she had it off with a miner. Then when I say miner, I'm talking about Kalgoorlie, with a Yugoslav. And I was the result of that relationship. And I caused her a lot of pain because I wasn't meant to be. And so after about 6 months being propped up by one of her sisters, my mum had to surrender me to the state. And I ended up in the Sisters of Mercy at Wembley, called the Family Home.
So after, when you became independent from everyone and everything, what's happened after years 16 or age 16?
Well, because I didn't respond at school.
What do you mean didn't respond at school?
Well, I never passed a class.
Oh.
When you looked at my file, it's just like that bit of paper you got there now. It's got my name, but there was nothing there. And eventually, one of the boys who was on the farm in the wheat belt in Calabaron, he told the welfare he told the cocky where he's working, farmer, in other words, that Brian Tennant's got a job, but they can't get him a job because he doesn't know anything, you know? And so the farmer rang the child welfare and they said, "Oh, you beauty." And so I was called over the mic, "Will Brian Tennant please come to the back door of the office?"
Yes.
"Get your toothbrush. Mr. Jackson's going to take you into the child welfare department, you know? You've got a job, you know?" And that was my belongings, a toothbrush. And of course, unknown to me, there was half a dozen other kids from other orphanages there at the same time. They all had jobs to go to. And so they took us down to Bones, those big stores, and spent about £60 on us, which was a lot of money those days.
By the sound of it, yes.
Each. And so we were well clothed, and I was just 16 then. And then I was still a state ward. I had to stay on the farm. And then I was 200 kilometres from nowhere, and bearing in mind 16 years of white sheets, hot showers, companionship, friends, all of a sudden I'm on my own, lonely as terrible. I didn't know how to make friends, and the first 5 years was horrible. And then I was called up for national service, and the national service was interesting because I said, "This is like old times. Dormitories, I'm going to join the army. It's too lonely out there, you know?
Yeah.
Too lonely. I'm going to join the army."
And you
did? Of course, having a big mouth, I told everyone I'm joining the army. And of course, they checked me just like before I went to the national service. They went to the dentist, the doctor, the candlestick maker, and, you know, all that. And then the last thing was an officer walked in the door with a bit of paper. He picked up the newspaper. He says, "Okay, heads down. There's about a dozen of us in there." It was an aptitude test. I couldn't spell. I could write. I could write, but I couldn't spell. So I was stuffed. 8 of us walked out we couldn't spell. I applied 3 times to join the army, and I failed 3 times. But the colonel in charge of recruiting,
Yeah.
I told the colonel, I says, you know, the procedure of joining the Army, Navy or Air Force, you go to the doctor, the Air Force, the dentist and the candlestick maker, and it's ridiculous, I said. And I told him about the statistics of my 2 goes. He noted it down. And I says it would be good if you had the aptitude test first on the application. You didn't, when you got that, you didn't have to worry about mum and dad's permission or anything like that.
Yes.
And anyway, he noted it down, and I thought nothing more of it. But it's about 6 months later, there's a bit in the newspaper, a little bit like that. Lieutenant Colonel so-and-so in charge of recruitment has recommended to the military board to change the procedure of joining the Army, Navy, Air Force. The aptitude first. Statistics are that 75% of people can't even spell, and so they failed. And but this will save hundreds of thousands now, it'd be millions, blah, blah, blah. So that was my first, I wasn't conscious of it then.
Yeah.
That was my first social reform.
So how could Brian Tennant,
Yes.
who barely can
Spell.
spell,
I could write but not spell, yeah.
could write, but probably no one understands afterwards, like my writing, because I couldn't spell much.
I was noticing you
So-
writing there, but anyway.
So, my writing is just as bad as yours, but you, without that writing skill or writer's skill, you achieved so much in the 70s. Do you think it is because the 70s was a different era compared with the 21st century and the 2016, when
No.
we're sitting in here?
It was just circumstances of the day. It was just circumstances of the media of the day. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I was always getting. But believe in the orphanages, there's a lot of people like me, and they couldn't spell and poor, and when they got into trouble with police, they didn't have no one to bail them out, so they just stayed in custody because they didn't have parents, and so I said, what I'll do, I said, this is the power of the media. I realised the power of the media then. And so I said, what I'll do, I said, with the help of students, and I palled up with a few of them. One's a Supreme Court judge now, of course. There's been one for years. But anyway, getting back to it, I relied
Decided,
on,
yes.
And then the Civil Liberties Association at that time, they read about me, I complained about conditions at the East Perth lockup, for example. We're out in the cold, we're staying out there, waiting there for hours, and there's a notice there saying loitering, you can be, because it is a type of prison. And anyway, so I said to the sergeant, look, can't we come inside? He says, just stay outside there and don't, if you stay there too long, we'll have to, whatever.
Have to
And anyway,
move you over.
Anyway, so I said, this is terrible. Because, and then I wrote something down. I said, because the sergeant was a pig, this, that, and then he grunted and all this stuff. And when I gave it to a lady friend of mine, who's a nice typist, it worked out, and the sergeant was most impolite and blue. It was beautiful, And anyway, when I sent it off to the commissioner, mind you, the first write-up was complaint over lockup,
Yes.
The second one, now it's comfort in lockup. When the commissioner got it, he says, it's funny, Mr. Tennant, I agree with you entirely. In fact, I was just walking down the steps and there's a nice lounge setting there, can be utilised for people who come in on bail business. I've instructed my officers to invite people there who come here on bail business or visiting, whatever. And it says, now it's comfort lockup. I said, wow, that's an achievement, And then, of course, I went to the people in custody, in custody in remand prisoners, the innocent till proven. And so, and even made a contribution to the Defendants Cost Act, which now you get your costs back for trials in the magistrates' courts and successful appeals in the superior courts from those. So I made a contribution. I can't say I, because that was referred to the Law Reform Commission. And so we got all those sorts of things, and I just haven't stopped. And one of the major reforms I made a contribution to was the Spent Conviction Act, because
What is the Spent Conviction Act?
It means when you are convicted of a criminal offence, it stays there for life. And when you apply for a job,
Yes.
particularly if it's dishonestly, like in other words, I'm an orphan, I'm cold, I'm out of work, I break into a clothes shop, and I pinch something, it's a criminal conviction. And naturally, if you've got dishonest, when you apply for a job, the chances are no, 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 no. One chap there who was educated, he got his junior certificate, he was a clever person. Because he was lonely, he mixed up with us. And of course, you know, got into trouble, like what I'm talking about. And when he got a job in a high school as a technician for 40 years or whatever, but he was always applying for improvement because the people who were going up before him, he was more, but when he put in his record, he went down to the bottom. And
Because of his criminal record.
Yeah, because of his criminal record. And so the Spent Conviction Act is now, is that if I'm sentenced to, for example, to 12 months imprisonment and I'm out, you know, in 6 months, it doesn't matter. When the 12 months is up, 10 years, if you're a clean skin for 10 years, you can apply to have your conviction declared spent. And the purpose of that primarily, no, it's not only,
Yes.
is for employment purposes, not only, but primarily for that. Particularly if you're a university graduate and you do something stupid or you pinch a pie, you haven't paid for it, you know, your whole career's gone, you know. And so of course, in that, of course, if the magistrate sees it's a one-off thing, he'll declare it spent on the spot. So there's discretion there. And even though before that we did have the First Offenders Act where the magistrate could find the case proven but dismissed.
With this achievement on that criminal record keeping,
Yes.
mainly for the work purposes, as you said, it's not working on some crimes now, because if you got drug, that's not going away from your your records, and if you got sex offender, it's not going away from your records, and so on. So,
oh well, with due respect, with this sex record, if you, let's say I molested a child, and I got you know, 5 years, right? And that 5 years is up, and another 10's up, right? Now, you can have the conviction declared spent, but unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it,
yes, right.
you're on the, I'll use the word pedophile. You're on the sex database,
sex offenders,
and you stay there for about 15 years if you're lucky, you know, and so it's really sad that way. But in regard to, but when you're applying for a job where there's children, only then you've got to admit that. So there is, you know, these hiccups in life.
We have to go for a short break.
Yes.
And then we will continue our discussion with Brian Tennant, who is a social reformer. Please stay with us, because after the break, we're coming back. Hello and welcome back to One-on-One Shadowboxing. Have your say. We are continuing our discussions with Brian Tennant, the social reformer of Perth or WA. Brian, you told us, you know, some of the things what you've done and how you changed the world a little bit around us in the 70s, 80s. And I was suspecting, you know, you couldn't do those things these days in Perth, in Western Australia.
I'm glad you said that. At that time, I had more access to the media. And in fact, even when I resigned after 10 years from the civil liberties because I was burnt out, I carried on solo, you know, but I still had access to the media because they were my weapon, you might say, to shame the government in doing the right thing. You know, for example, as I said, a lot of things need to be reformed. We're so outdated that, for example, a man in a posh suburb allowed his dog to follow his daughter to Churchill and High School, and you know how that's a very serious thing because the principal and the deputy principal have a responsibility for the welfare of the kids, and if that dog bites somebody, the school's up for damages. Not only that, that it's the child, welfare is at stake. And so that man was charged with 2 counts, one of an unlicensed dog and uncontrollable dog, the owner, that is the father. And he just signed the paper, of course I'm guilty, sent it into the magistrate, and he was fined, say, $7 and $10 respectively. And anyway, he got a cost of whatever, and he rang up the lawyers and he says, you didn't have to be there, I pleaded guilty. You didn't have to send a bloody lawyer there. He says, I'm sorry, the City of Stirling's our client, mate. You just pay it. He says, get effed. I'll pay the cost. I'll pay the fine, but not the cost. So he came around to me and he says, Brian, he told me the story of what I told you.
Yes.
And I said,
it's
well,
an injustice, he said.
And I said, really, you went to the East Perth lockup for a bad debt, technically speaking.
Yes.
But nevertheless, I said, leave it with me, I'll see if I can work something out to stop this from happening again. So damn me, at work we seem to enjoy ourselves when we see each other getting hurt, spill paint, or getting a parking ticket. Oh, you poor bugger, And one of my mates got a parking ticket. And I said, that's it. That's it. Without research, 99%, without research, 99% of people on these minor charges plead guilty because they couldn't afford to go to court anyway.
Yes.
And anyway, so I got media, and the headlines was dog owner goes to prison. It was beautiful. Dog owner, and I always went on Sunday afternoon when all the ministers' offices are closed. So there's not much. All there is on the weekend is sports.
Yes.
So I always had the West, in my pocket. You might say, on Saturday afternoons, and mostly got published. So dog owner goes to prison. So the local council's in uproar. Geez, what did you bloody do this for? This, that. And eventually I said, I recommended to the Minister for Local Government that the law be changed from when your pets get into minor trouble like this, that you get an infringement notice like a parking ticket. You still have a right to go to court or you pay it. And so the Minister says the Dog Act was being drafted up. Put that in, what Tennant's got, put that in. Now it's ticket for dogs, And then, of course, that mushroomed to other reforms. I bet you that lawyer regrets saying to that bloke, just pay it up anyway, because the lawyers did themselves out of a job,
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
Brian, if you're thinking about today, of course, you have to think about what was your most famous case or most successful one, because I remember of something just happened very recently, a couple of years ago.
The Millard case.
Yes.
And when Millard was convicted of the murder of the person in Mosman Park,
In the jewelry shop.
In Mosman Park, he was set up by when he was convicted on the Friday, the family came to see me on the Saturday. The family, and our son's innocent. See. And unfortunately, he's a bit like myself in my early time. When you start talking, you can't stop. But anyway, the police were saying, look, you would have dragged her through that door and hit her on the head a dozen times, and yeah, I would have done that, and you would have done this and that. Yeah, I would have done that. And said, now we'll just go on camera now. You said this, that, and they signed him up that way, And so I gave that to a Master of Education who does drafting for me still. And when they gave me the record of interview, he saw shit they set up all right. And we gave that, he gave what's the word, linguistic or some, he done a paper on it. And I gave that to Malcolm Acosta.
Malcolm Acosta.
Yeah, we're talking about the mid-90s now.
Yes.
Malcolm Acosta. Oh, Brian, this is terrible. It's something to be concerned about. Yes, blah, boo, 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 So years went past, This is the price we pay when you're poor. When you're poor, and I'll tell you what happens when you're rich. But anyway, but when you're poor. So eventually, early this century, Malcolm activates Colin Egan. Colin Egan activates quickly, and they get stuck into it. And that was my part, right? And eventually he quickly finds out, Jesus, a lot of stuff there that the state should have given the other side, blah, blah, blah. And also there was a palm print, blood on the wall. They got that, everything, filed it, but they never processed it, right? So 12 years later, they're coming to an end. They go to the full court of WA. There's only 3 judges. And I don't mind saying it, as long as I don't say their names. Had some police judges, in my opinion. I noticed Malcolm Acosta, he was raving on there, telling, yep, 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 yep. And I noticed 2 of the judges writing notes to each other, just waiting for his mouth to stop, you know. They weren't really listening to him at all. But anyway, so when he'd finished, they said, we'll reserve our decision. And weeks later, they came back and came back with a judgment, which took about 30 seconds. Judgment is that so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the case is dismissed. Boom, you know. And before that happened, there was the definition. He's a social worker of sort, not quite a reverend, but, you know, I said, you better hold that girl there because I think I know what's going to happen. The coppers are in the king's seat in the bar place there, you know, ready to be rewarded. One of the judges, it's not a crime, by the way, husband happens to be a policeman anyway, but don't worry about that. So anyway, so the police they're happy and we're crying, not we, but the things. I said, I'm not surprised. I witnessed myself, they're just waiting for poor Malcolm to stop his mouth moving. So then they went to the High Court. And the High Court had what you call a preliminary session first to see if there's whatever.
To hear the case, yeah.
And the judge said, it better be good, Mr. Prosecutor, it better be good. And when the High Court handed down its judgment, it criticised every level of authority, including the police, the judges themselves, the DPP not handing over vital stuff to the other side. Every level of justice was done, you know, was got at. And the sad part about it is that instead of him getting $3.5 million, like the copper who was trying to test, what do you call those things you shoot? Test? Teaser somebody. He ended up as a cripple. He got $3.5 million. Who else got $3.5 million? Ward, who died in the police van.
Yes.
On a hot day. He got $3.5 million rather.
Yes.
And this poor bastard only gets the lawyer for some stupid reason asks us for $500 and he gets $475 or some ridiculous amount. And it was wrong because, if you know what I mean, that it was just one of those horrible things.
But Millard is out now and he got some payment as well.
Yeah.
And it's all started with your contribution when the family approached you.
My initiation, getting the school teacher to do a thing on the record of interview, but then, as you say, but unfortunately when you've got no money, you have to suffer pro bono, and I salute the people who do that pro bono because they're doing it for nothing, or for the cause, if you like. But again...
If you got money?
Now, that's good. If you got money, i.e. the chap in Daglish, whose wife disappeared, and he was charged with murdering his wife, and he was a young chap, and she was good looking, by the way, a nice young woman, and he was nice as well. And of course, he was charged with murder. He was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. And after about 3.5 years, he managed to get relatives in Canada to raise $1 million. And when he got that $1 million, within 12 months, he appealed successfully and retried and acquitted, all in that same 12 months. So need I say more? There's 2 people that agree now was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 7. He's in his 24th year now because he won't admit guilt. McCartney got life imprisonment with a minimum of 14 years. He's done 16 now. He's dying of cancer. And I'm hoping to have him free before he dies. and I'm having trouble even getting his. I'm working with a retired solicitor, and we're getting huge information in his favour, huge. And we say to the registrar of the Supreme Court, look, we want the transcript. You've got that. You've got to pay $7.10 a page, you know. And of course, with the technology we've got now, this is a reform I'll have to entertain. Not so much for this case, but generally speaking.
In general, yeah, the payments.
The important thing is, what do you call those things you put in your computer? The thumbs? What do you call them?
USBs.
But what do you call them? Little things.
USB.
Yeah.
Sticks. Yes.
Now, there's nothing stopping them from putting a transcript on those things.
And doesn't cost anything.
Yeah, but particularly when the persons are involved, you have the authority of the person, of the prisoner. Why charge people $7.10? I thought it was bad enough when I went to the thing, when I went to the some business and they charge you and they charge you 20 cents or 50 cents. I thought that was bad enough, but
$7.50 still for a page.
Yeah, to me that is deliberately hindering the person who's trying to prove their innocence. They're screwing people unnecessary. Not only screwing, but it's the stress, and it's the stress.
And the expense, what they spend
and
in
the
prison
expense.
Well. Brian.
Yeah, sorry.
Brian Tennant.
I'm sorry.
You are a real social reformer, and you're not stopping since the 70s. And I wish you luck for your future reforms.
Okay, thank you.
Good
very
luck.
Much. Okay, that's wonderful.
Don't forget, next week, same time, same channel. One-on-one shadow boxing. Have your say.
Not me, that's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.